let's talk about reading slumps. I honestly cannot remember a time when I was not an avid reader. I have always been a bookaholic. I have always identified so strongly with this one particular theme, this one particular obsession and passion. But of course, for any of you guys who are also book lovers, bookaholics, you probably know very well as well the feeling of a reading slump when you just don't have motivation for whatever reason. This doesn't mean that you're falling out of love with this hobby. This doesn't mean that you're completely losing the passion, but everyone who loves anything has gone through a slump with that particular thing, and sometimes it feels like the slump just won't end and you don't know how to get past it, but you want to because you want to continue to pursue this passion and to continue to love this thing. I'm sure you've seen YouTube videos about reading slumps, tips to overcome them, people just talking about being in them, books that help them get out of it, etc. I'm gonna do a video like that today because I have never talked about reading slumps. It is something that I have definitely experienced. And I wanna talk about one particular reading slump that was the biggest reading slump I have ever experienced, and it definitely made me question a lot of things. It put me in a situation where I was honestly wondering if I had completely lost it and if I would ever be able to get it back, that passion that I had. So let's start with a little story time. When I went to university, I studied primarily English literature. So that was my bachelor's degree. I then went on to get a one-year master's degree in the UK in British literature, specifically Romantic and Victorian literature. So basically reading was what I did. That and of course essay writing and research and stuff like that. But everything I did for 5.5 years of my life was about literature. I say 5.5, by the way, because I got 2 minors from a bachelor's degree, so it actually took me an extra half year, an extra semester to finish my bachelor's degree. But for a very long time is the gist of what I'm trying to say. For my bachelor's degree, I did study several different types of literature, as well as literary theory and stuff like that. Of course, all of the core elements of that degree. The degree is not just reading books, it's much more intense than that. And please, if you're a troll and you're gonna go down in the comment section and rehash some stupid argument against the liberal arts,
don't waste your breath, please, like seriously.
During my bachelor's degree, I did continue to read outside of what was required reading. So a lot of my required reading, of course, were the classics. It was a lot of literary fiction amongst the contemporary literature that I read. So I did continue to read mainly YA, but any type of mainstream. I read romance, I read thriller, I read whatever else as well on the side of my bachelor's degree. And I didn't have a ton of time because, like I said, I did my main degree, my major, as well as 2 minors, music and creative writing. So I was doing some writing for my classes, some writing for me, my mainstream writing, plus the reading, plus the violin and orchestra and stuff like that. So I had a lot of stuff going, but I did still continue to read. I still did manage to find the passion and the time, just at a very slow pace compared with what I did in high school, obviously. And then summers, I would dedicate often to reading. I spent an entire summer reading all of the Lord of the Rings completely all the way through for the very first time from start to finish. My master's degree in particular, it's not really a surprise, I guess, but it was way more intense than my bachelor's. I did just focus on literature. I wasn't doing the minors. I didn't have writing classes. I didn't have orchestra and violin and all of that. I should have had more time, you would think, but I didn't because the reading load was insane. Again, it can be expected, I suppose. It is a master's degree. It's supposed to be more advanced, but I was getting reading assignments that would be so enormous, so much literature to read, so many pages to absorb that I could barely keep up with just the reading, let alone all of the other stuff you have to do, like the analysis, and to actually really delve into a text, you should read texts about it, essays about it, but I barely had time just to read it and get it done before class. So it was really intense. And that meant that I read very little outside of my classes during that time. Anytime I had a free evening or free weekend, I would spend it doing anything except with a book. I wanted to spend time with my friends. I wanted to go out and explore because I was studying in the UK, so I wanted to do little weekend trips or even just explore the city where I was living. There were so many opportunities there that were not in a book that I kind of drifted away from it. And that was great. That was really what I needed outside of those classes. But what that also meant was that I was just reading when it was required reading, and I was doing anything except reading in my free time when I actually got to choose what I might like to read, what I might be interested in. Reading became something that you did for class, like you would, you know, fill out your homework. It was reading a book was my homework. And it was only 1 year. It wasn't like a huge amount of time, but I think that probably was the last step to my burnout. So after I graduated, I finished my master's thesis, all of that, I did go to Spain for a couple of months, and that just became my breath of fresh air outside of the academic world, outside of the reading world. I was in Spain, so I was surrounded by Spanish, so I started focusing on Spanish, as well as I started to kind of tamper with French a little bit at that point as well. And I did not read. I don't remember picking up a single book when I was in Spain, English or Spanish or French or any of them. I don't think I read anything. That was only for a couple of months, and then I moved back to the US, you guys might know, and I spent a little bit of time there. It was several months before I remember actually happily picking up a book that I genuinely wanted to read and starting to read it. I was in the biggest reading slump I have ever been in. I do remember going to bookstores sometimes because I love bookstores. That was my main hangout when I was in university. And I would go and I would look through books and get some ideas of maybe what I would want to read, but I couldn't find the spark. I wanted to do anything but. And then when I would sit down with a book, I had such trouble focusing. I had such trouble just getting through a book. And when I would start one, I'd read the first few chapters and I would decide, I don't actually like this. What am I doing? Like, why am I wasting my time with this book? I think what most of it boils down to is that I was just super burned out. I had done so many years of reading, both for pleasure, but especially for university, and I really burned myself out. Reading had just become an obligation. It just became something I did for classes, and it was not something I remembered how to enjoy, to be completely honest. All of that being said, I am obviously in a much better place with reading now. I have overcome that slump. It was a gradual process. It did take quite a bit of time and effort, but I got through it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, if that helps. And what I want to do now is specifically give you guys some tips and explain to you guys some of the things that I tried, that I did, that helped me come out of this reading slump. And hopefully, if you are going through a reading slump, or if you do hit one in the future, you'll remember these things, you can try these things, and I hope they help you as well. The first piece of advice is something that I so wish that I had followed early on in my reading slump, but I'm pretty sure I did not think of doing this until I had wasted so many months. Just start with something easy. Start with the most obvious thing. Start with something that is right up your alley. If you're a huge fantasy nerd like me and you just cannot get enough of fantasy, pick up something that is your hardcore high fantasy or low fantasy or urban fantasy or whatever it is that you're into. Go for something totally accessible. Don't go for that literary classic that everyone's been telling you have to read and you're not really a reader if you haven't read insert book here. Don't go for that thing that all of your friends are recommending and all of your friends are talking about. Go for something simple. When you're in a reading slump, you have temporarily forgotten how to enjoy literature. You're not excited about reading anymore, so you want to go for that thing that is most likely to get you excited. Something that just taps into what probably made you love reading in the first place. Sometimes I suppose reading slumps can actually be caused by reading too much of a genre. So if you think maybe that you've read too much and you've exhausted yourself and burned yourself out of that particular genre, then expanding to a different genre can be just the thing. But for example, I mean, I love classic literature, but I was so burnt out of classic literature after my master's degree that I definitely stayed far away from that. So even if classic literature had been one of my first loves, that wouldn't have been the way to go. Another tip is not just to read the same genre that you love, but to actually reread the books that you know you already love. This is also a trick that I use for movies, for TV shows, pretty much anything story related. This is something I've used for everything because I've gotten burnt out of all of those things before, and it does work, honestly. Go for something that you have already read, that you already know, maybe even something you haven't read for a while though, so that you can still sort of feel like you're rediscovering something, but something you know when you turn that last page, you're gonna be happy. I know it can sometimes feel like a waste of time. If you're anything like me, you will want to be productive a lot, and you have that urge that everything you do needs to somehow contribute to some productivity, to your to-be read list, to your to-do list or whatever. It's always in the back of your mind when you're doing something. So I know sometimes rereading can feel like you're just wasting time. You've already read it, you've already experienced this story, you know you like it, you should read something new. And a lot of people will tell you should read something new as well. You can feel that pressure of wanting to add more to your list, wanting to have more things done, wanting to check more boxes. And that's normal and that's fine, but you're not wasting time if you're actually reigniting that fire. It doesn't matter what you read, it doesn't matter if it checks a box, it doesn't matter if it's good for you or bad for you, or good literature or bad literature, or the literature that's gonna make you cool with your friends or on Twitter, or the literature that people are gonna go, are you kidding me? You're reading that again? It doesn't matter. If it makes you happy, if it lights the fire, that is exactly what you want, and that might just be the thing that could help you out of your reading slump. You know you're gonna be satisfied at the end. That's another thing that drove me crazy sometimes, because I'd start a book, I wouldn't like it, I'd be disappointed. That sort of fear of having wasted the time with something that you didn't like, you didn't appreciate, and that disappointment. I hate that disappointment when you read a book, especially if you make it like a quarter, halfway through, all the way through the book, and you just don't like it. You're like, what happened with this story? It's so disappointing. And if you're obsessed with stories like I am, it can be seriously disappointing because you invest so much and you put so much into that book. So you don't have any of that when you reread something that you know you're gonna love already. It automatically just wipes away some of those fears that might be holding you back from reading, and it just allows you to sit back and enjoy the story. Another tip is to take your book with you everywhere you go, or pretty much everywhere you go, whenever you can. I used to do this all the time when I was a kid. I was always that girl who had a book in her hand or in her bag, or later when I was a bit older in her purse. I was constantly carrying a book with me. And then of course I went to university and I was carrying university books with me. But either way, I identify so strongly with this person. You know when a character comes on in a TV show or in a movie and you're like, that is me. That was me every time anyone came on the screen with the book and the glasses, and yeah, I identify so strongly with that. So this also helped because I was sort of reaching back into the past and grabbing this identity that I loved and putting it on again. But at the same time, the main reason why I'm giving you this tip is because convenience is key. That's pretty much a mantra for anything in life. If it's convenient, you are so much more likely to actually do it. And it's the same with reading. If you have your book constantly with you, you're probably gonna notice that there are tons of little moments throughout your day that you might actually be able to fit in a chapter or even a few pages. A waiting room for a doctor's appointment, or if you commute in public transportation, for example, or if you commute with someone else and they're driving and you have some moments off, if you have a bit of time on your lunch break, whatever times may come up during your day, whatever your day looks like, you're probably gonna notice that there are just those moments when normally you'd probably pull out your cell phone, you check like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or something. But if you have a book with you, it is just as easy to grab your cell phone as it is to grab your book and to read. And I would very much encourage you to break the habit of grabbing the cell phone first, because you still might grab the cell phone first, but really try to think about the book and grab the book instead. I think another really big reason why I was struggling with reading for a while, and why I still sometimes struggle with reading, is that my attention span has probably gone down, I think, as I've gotten older. I don't know the reason. It could be a mixture of so many things, but whatever it is, I have a lot more trouble focusing now on something that is just really engrossing and absorbing. So jumping into a 400-page novel, which I love 400-page novels, but jumping into something like that can be quite difficult. It can be really difficult to separate, pull myself out of reality, put myself in a book, allow myself to just exist there for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. So one thing I would advise you to do, and something that definitely helps me, is put your phone on airplane mode, or put it on do not disturb, or turn it off, or whatever makes you completely zone out. Sometimes I would just put it on silent, even if I continue to let things roll in. I'd put it on silent, I put it face down where I can't see when notifications happen, and I would just put it aside. And I definitely recommend this one because I don't really need it that much anymore. Generally, even if I have it on vibrate or on sound, I can ignore it if I really get into a book. But for a while, it was really difficult, especially when I was I felt like I had to relearn the habit of reading. And when I was in that sort of stage, that phase, I would get very distracted very easily. So this one was definitely a lifesaver for me. The last tip that I have for you guys is particularly good for those amongst you who might be a little bit more extroverted, because yes, extroverted bookaholics do exist. I myself am more of an extrovert than I am an introvert. I think I have a little bit of both, but I tend to lean on the extroverted side. But really, regardless of whether you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert, I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that we like to share experiences as humans. We like to share things, to talk about things, to discuss things. So one thing that can definitely be a barrier to reading and can hold you back, especially when you're fighting a reading slump, is the fact that it is so solitary. Even if you're in the room with someone, you're experiencing something alone. So maybe one thing that can help, and this is something that helped me as well, is to either read something with someone, not necessarily literally with someone, but simultaneously. So you read the same amount of chapters in the same amount of time and you discuss it like a book club. whether it's an official book club or just you and a friend, or you can simply talk to someone who has read the book and tell them where you are. When you read a new chapter, when something new and exciting happens in the book, text that friend or call that friend and talk to them about what's happening. Telling people, sharing that with someone, even if you're not sharing the actual moment of reading, you are definitely encouraging yourself to keep moving forward, to keep reading more chapters, turning more pages. This can be a huge, huge motivator. And it also doesn't hurt that it can give you a little bit of accountability as well. That definitely helps most of us, including me. I hope this has been useful to you guys. This has been super fun for me to film, and it's actually just making me want to read. If you are experiencing a reading slump right now, I really encourage you to test these things out and let me know. Come back to the comments or send me a message on Instagram or Twitter and let me know which ones helped you, if any. I hope several of them, some of them will be helpful for you. If you have experienced a reading slump in the past and something else also helped you and you found another tip, please, please, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to know for myself, for future reading slumps, knock on wood, but they probably will happen at some point in my lifetime because that's just the way it goes. If you're curious to keep up with what I'm reading, when I'm reading it, etc., I do have a Goodreads, but I would recommend you just follow me on Instagram because I don't always update my Goodreads with what I read. So if you're curious, definitely head over there. I recently posted a recent book haul. I don't buy books in hauls very often, which is why I don't make book haul videos. But whenever I do buy stuff, I usually post on Instagram because I'm pretty happy about it. So you can go over there and check out the books that I just bought and tell me which one I should start with. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another video.